very happy to be able to share with you some information and also maybe a little bit much of historical facts, because I'm my first degree is in history. So and also I studied in Western Jesuit School of Theology, doing the Master of Theological Studies in the United States. So my specialization was also church history. And today I hope to deliver to you several topics, one of which will be a little bit more on general background of what's going on with Ukrainian Greek Catholics, especially in the 20th century and especially after the Second World War. And then I will tell you a little bit about my Institute of Church History main oral history project, because maybe some of you are already acquainted with this method of historical research as oral history. Maybe later you can share your own experience if you have already done something with in that field. And also then I will tell you a little bit about catacomb period of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church after its liquidation in the Soviet Union, and also finish with the process of legalization and some specifics of it. So that's the plan for today's hour. I hope it will go well. If you have any questions, so please feel free, write it in the chat box. So we will look at them at the end. I hope I will leave some time for that. If not, we have Father Roman, who is a very strict moderator, so he will just he will not let me to talk too much, I hope. Anyway.
The priest can't be very strict.
Well, anyway, so let me try to share with you the presentation. Let me tell if you can see it, because today I had problem with...
Make it for the full screen.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. So I had problem today showing it. Okay, let me pin myself.
We can see it.
You can see, okay, and let me know if you can switch, if you can see other slides. So that's our topic, that's me. I'm associate professor, also I'm teaching courses on church history, and I'm responsible for the practice of students of theology department of the master program. And okay, so now let's go to our topic and a little bit of general background, because I can see that you are from different countries, different even continents. So you probably already heard a lot about Ukraine and this situation within my country, but nevertheless, let's see a little bit from my point of view. So I'm going to speak today about Ukrainian Greek or Greco-Catholic Church. Why I took it in parentheses, Greek or Greco, because the word, this definition Greek is about the right of this church, right? And the Ukrainian diaspora, for example, using in the title for the church, the Ukrainian Catholic Church. But in Ukrainian, we would say Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church. But in most English publication, you will see the terminology, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. But actually, it's not Greek. It's only by its right. So it's one of the Eastern Catholic churches, obviously, which is shown in its name. It was created during two ecclesiastical unions with Rome. One was the Brest Union of 1596, and Uzhhorod Union 1646. Also, my church recognizes the leadership of the Pope and jurisdictions. And also what is important about this church, because it's, as we mentioned before, Eastern Catholic Church, it preserves its own traditions, and among them is liturgical Byzantine rite. Also some ecclesiastical traditions, for example, married clergy, and Father Roman is one of the examples of married priest. And also what is important about this church to remember that it never has been a state church. It was, if we compare it to some Catholic church within the world, it's very similar to the Catholic Church in Ireland. So people didn't have their own state, but they have their own church, and they were very much interconnected with it. Within church came intelligentsia, elite of the people, right? And it was so especially during the 20th century for Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Also, if we look at the Central Eastern Europe, there were not only Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, but also there were other Catholic Greek Catholic churches, and they existed at that time within states of Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, and Yugoslavia. And what else is common to all of those Greek Catholic, it was that before the First World War, they all existed within the territory of the Habsburg Empire. So it was an empire which was, even though like the ruling dynasty was Catholic, but nevertheless it was the empire which united different nations, different people by definition and by their faith, and nevertheless it was quite tolerant. And also actually the name Greek Catholic was given to this church by Austrian emperors. Here is some statistical data just for you to understand the scale of this church, and it's an example of the Halych Metropolitanate. And it was a normal church, so it has its own metropolitan, it had bishops, it had priests as
before the Second World War, I think.
Yes, sorry, it's not shown here yet, but it's before 1939. Thank you, Father Roman. And also it has theological academy, seminaries, female and male monastic orders, and nearly 4 million faithful. So just like any normal church. However, this territory was annexed to the Soviet Union, and it happened in Halych twice. So first time it was after division of the Second Polish Commonwealth, or as we said, division of the Poland by Nazi and Soviets within the Ribbentrop-Molotov secret treaty. And 1939, so actually up to 1941, it was the first period when the Soviets came to Halych, and the second time it was in 1944, and it was true to Halych with the center in Lviv, and also to Transcarpathia with the center of Uzhhorod and Mukachevo. And thus, with this annexation, two ecclesiastical entity, you can say, entered within the Soviet atheistical regime. And in Soviet Union, by that time, by the beginning of the Second World War, under the Stalin, religion and religious people, believers, churches were persecuted. And it was really the war against religion. So as I mentioned, official ideology was atheism. Priests, bishops, believers were persecuted, were killed, and the churches were destroyed. And here you can see some examples. And of course, religious books were burned, so there was a lot of different organization. Among them, for example, was the military bezbožnik, which means unbeliever or atheist, which was officially, this organization was officially fighting with religion and creating this discourse of anti-religious propaganda, which was later on transferred also to the territory I'm talking about. However, there were slight changes in the relationship between the Soviet state and the Russian Orthodox Church, and it was because of the need of Stalin to have proven to his allies. At that time it was Great Britain and United States, that there is no persecution of religion within the Soviet Union. And thus, slowly, Stalin started to use the church not only to prove the freedom of religion, but also to use this discourse of the Holy War, which was the Soviet people leading against the Nazi invaders. Thus, there was published a book in Russian and also in English. I have here only the title of the Russian, and it was done in 1942 when there was shortage of paper, when the front was moving eastward. So, but nevertheless, propaganda was still here and very active. And also in September 1943, Stalin met with three bishops who were not imprisoned, and he decided that he needs patriarchate, and thus was called Sobor. Some bishops were driven from the Soviet labor camps to Moscow, and thus there was Sobor held, and that Sobor of Russian Orthodox bishop elected new Moscow Patriarch Sergei. And thus the Russian Orthodox Church and also the Soviet state under the Stalin united their attempts and to form anti-Vatican combat forces. It, of course, in parentheses. However, Stalin had very far-reaching aims, and he had aspiration to create within Moscow and around the Moscow Patriarchate the Third Rome, meaning the center of the Orthodoxy of the worldwide Orthodoxy. And he even thought about taking in some Protestants and have them and later use them in the interests of the creating the Soviet empire within the whole world. So far-reaching plans. Nevertheless, to deal with the church and other religious community within the Soviet government were created two councils. One was the Council for the Affairs of the Russian Orthodox Church, and the head of this council became Georgy Karpov, who was a colonel of Soviet state security and KGB. And later on, when the war front or war line moved westward, and new territories with population belonged to different, not only Orthodox, but there were also Catholic, Greek Catholics, Protestants, Jews. So there was created Council for the Affairs of the Religious Cults. And the chairman became another KGB officer, Ivan Polansky. And those officers were in charge for some time, and actually they were the one who dealt with the issue of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Of course, in order to establish a Soviet authority within newly acquired Western borderlands, there was need in propaganda. And here you can see some examples. If you don't know, this is Joseph Stalin, the head of the Soviet Union. So his portraits were put everywhere. So it's the building of the opera theater in Lviv, and this is hospital. So the stars, the symbols, Russian symbols, well, Soviet symbols were put everywhere. And also for Russians, or rather Soviets, sorry, I will be switching, but it's not the same. Actually, Soviets should be used here. Was also important to have publicity and have a lot of propaganda, and present the picture to citizens within the Soviet Union and also outside the Soviet Union, a picture of the winning side, means the Soviet state. And here we see the final stage of the so-called Lviv Council, which was held on March 8 to 10th, 1946, which was actually a special operation created and moderated and fully done by Soviet state security and Russian Orthodox Church. And it was filmed. All the results have to be done and seen publicly, as I mentioned before. And thus, the main goal of this special operation for the liquidation of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church general have the aim to eliminate the influence of Vatican over the new Western borderlands of the Soviet Union. Because besides Western Ukraine, Western Belarus territory, also Baltic countries such as Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia were also annexed. And thus, for example, Lithuanian Catholic Church is one of the strongest, and it was resisting to the new Soviet rule. Thus, it was important to subdue the resistance, and the Russian Orthodox Church was seen by Stalin and Soviet authorities as the mean for Sovietization and also Russification of the local population. And in particular, the goal of this so-called Lviv Council was official and public denunciation of the Brest Union, which created the union with Rome, and also to subject the Greek Catholic Church into the jurisdiction of the Moscow Patriarch, and the mean for that was reunification, even though Halych Metropolitanate never have been under the Moscow Patriarch. But nevertheless, as it was pointed out in the documents, it was the return of the Greek Catholics, or as they were called, Uniates, to the Mother Church, which never have been the Mother Church. And what interesting was that there was a lot of symbolism. Soviets like symbolical dates and signs, and it have to be done on the feast day of the Triumph of Orthodoxy, which was not know-how. Actually, it was used previously because whenever Russian Empire occupied the territory where Greek Catholic eparchies, usually they will go by its liquidation. And during the Romanov Empire, there were already 4 huge stages of liquidation of the Uni of Brest within those territories. Here you can see the map. And actually the 4th stage was done by Stalin in 1946. And as I mentioned, symbolism was something that Tsar Russian and later on Stalin liked a lot. And for example, there were done memorial medals for the religious reunions. And here is one of such medal, and it's very prominent because on one side of this medal was written, "Detached with violence," meaning union of Brest, and "reunited with love," meaning the Polotsk so-called Sobor of 1839. And also on the other side of that medal commemorative was what we had already, Triumph of Orthodoxy. Okay. I always tell my students to switch off their cell phones, but I haven't done it myself. Sorry for that. I'm doing it right now. Sorry for the pause. Okay. And it's also important that Orthodoxy or faith was one of the cornerstone of the Romanov Empire identity, because it was also multi-ethnical empire, and so orthodoxy, autocracy, and populace. It was 3 like cornerstones of the Tsarist Russian identity he wanted to have within his empire. And thus, Soviets also tried to use this style, this symbolism, as we already heard that it was chosen a specific date, Triumph of Orthodoxy, right? And also they filmed a movie, and they published even at the same year the book, the proceedings of the acts of the so-called Lviv Council of 1946, which announced what was requested by Stalin, denunciation of Union of Brest and reunification of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church with the Moscow Patriarch. So that was happening. What happened afterwards? Officially, the church was announced liquidated on the official level. First of all, through the arrest of all bishops, including Metropolitan first of all, but also there were arrested priests, many nuns, religious, also many laity was arrested, and even a family of priests have to suffer, and they were arrested and sent farther away to the far corners of the Soviet Union, up to the Far East, for example, or to the north for the special settlement, and they were not allowed to come back. And the main church was the enemies of the state and the anti-Soviet propaganda. So they were, most of those arrested were charged with that. And also, of course, the high treason of the Soviet states. Even though that people have not been citizen of that state, they didn't speak Russian, they could speak Polish, Latin, Greek, Ukrainian, of course, and as well German, because of those connections, first with Habsburgs and then living within the Second Polish Commonwealth. Thus, all church property of Ukrainian Greek Catholics was confiscated by the state, partly given to the Orthodox Church and partly left within the state and turned into storehouses, theater, clubs, sport halls, and so forth. And then came gradual liquidation of the Greek Catholic monasteries. It lasted for some time. And also were assassinated the key local collaborators who helped in this Soviet special operation in liquidation of the Greek Catholic Church. It was the Father Hofriil Kostelnik. He was killed after he finished the liturgy and went on his way to home. And also communist writer Yaroslav Halam, who was killed with the axe, and after his death, local priest and his two sons were accused of organizing this second assassination, and a huge wave of arrests all over Halachina was taking place. And later on, in 1949, was also liquidated the last Greek Catholic eparchy within Soviet Union, Mukachevo eparchy in Transcarpathia. And there is citation to show you this like final line drawing by the Karpov in his secret report to Stalin, that everything done as you requested, Comrade Stalin, and so there is no more Greek Catholics within the Soviet Union. But it was unofficial language. However, of course, Greek Catholics remain, and they survived, and they strived through all these years what we call underground church. And here is map of imprisonment places where many, here you can see some pictures of priests, of family members. They have to work in very harsh circumstances, cutting the trees under the temperature under -40, even sometimes 50 degree, especially in the north. So many of them died, but many also survived. Here is the family of Father Kotlяревsky, for example. He, his wife, and two kids. And this is the house where they have to stay with two other family of Greek Catholic priests who were sent to that special settlement called Jonka. And also I want to pay your attention to this. It's very small, but hopefully you can see a number which every Soviet prisoner, especially political prisoner, have on their robes, and also on the head, on the sleeve, and in front of their robe. And here is one very interesting citation. I wanted to show it to you and share it with you. About stereotype of Ukrainians as merciless killers, and it was told by Father Volodymyr Sienkiewski, who was imprisoned in Siberia and later also in Kazakhstan, and he was telling this story. Let me read it to you. It was a young girl. She graduated from the construction school and was hired by the camp administration. But she refused to work with us after her appointment to the political, meaning where Father Volodymyr was kept camp. She refused because she heard about us that we are horrible criminals, that we jump up 3 meters high, kill people, that all the numbers that we have on our camp ropes are the numbers of people we killed. She said, "You'd better kill me as I have to die at the hands of those terrible banderivtsi." And this banderivtsi is the gathered name of Ukrainian political prisoners. And it's not just her, they believed it. And when our numbers were taking off, and it happened after the death of Stalin in 1943, we became ordinary prisoners, like everybody in the camp. She told me, I heard it from her. She said, when I came to you and saw that there was an announcement near the dining room of the political prisoner section camp, whoever lost this scarf, let him go to such and such barrack and find there a certain man. It was something incomprehensible to me. How for someone to give away a scarf, but you can steal it and keep it to yourself? She was all the time in those camps of thieves and swindlers. But here, when she personally met us and saw for herself that those people were alike, she said to me, how they deceived us. So through this eyewitness account, Father Volodymyr shows that stereotypes are always done by the propaganda, and you believe propaganda, it will stay with you. But when you is open to listen to other side, when you could witness through your own eyes what's going on, then you can see the difference and start to distinguish the truth and the lies, and the stereotypes are broken within that frame. Thus, this interview was gathered and is one of the interviews gathered in the oral history project of the clandestine life of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, which was done by Institute of Church History where I work. And this institute was founded 30 years ago by Boris Gudzak, who was at that time graduate of the Harvard University. He defended his PhD, and he had this idea to gather the stories of the underground church, of every person telling their personal story, how they lived through the persecution time, how they lived within the Soviet empire of lies, because that priest I mentioned before, Father Volodymyr Sienkiewski, he said in his interview also that Soviets taught me to lie. He was never lying, but they taught him to lie. It was regarding when he, after coming back from the Soviet, after liberation from the Soviet labor camps, he came back, and when he applied to the work, of course, your record as a prisoner, former prisoner, was not very good for a recommendation for those who are hiring you to work. Thus, one of Soviet official, he said, just don't mention it. And he didn't, but he recognized that it was a lie. So, and he stated, the Soviets taught me to lie. Anyway, so this institute at the beginning was just very small, 3 people. You can see the computer, which was one of the first computers employed to transcribe the oral history stories, and the director of the institute, who is now very respected Metropolitan of Philadelphia, Metropolitan Boris Gudzak. Anyway, What was important prerequirements for this project? It was focused on the catacomb church period, on the persecution by the state, and also it touched the process of the legalization of this church at the end of the existing Soviet Union. And it was done through interviews, namely the biographical or life stories of the members of the catacomb church. It had specific questionnaires for the laity, for monastic, for nuns, for priests who were ordained before the liquidation of the church and after. It was also consisting that questionnaire of 150 different questions, and it had 7 main parts. An interview was conducted with those who were still alive at the time. Now you can imagine that many of them are already dead, but nevertheless their voice, their stories are alive, and they are open for researchers. Also, out of those, not only interview, but also other documents, materials, photos was for archive. And now it has about 2,100 interviews. And also there are 100 one-hour video interviews, circa 5,000 photos, many documents, and also museum items, as well as within our campus in Lviv is one museum roof of Patriarch Joseph Slipy, who was the one leading the church when it was liquidated, and he was the one who spent 18 hours as prisoner of the Soviet camps, labor camps, and he was the one who was liberated on the request of Pope John XXIII, and he joined the second after liberation. He couldn't go to Ukraine, but he went directly to Italy, to Rome, and Joseph Slipy participated in the second session of the Second Vatican Council and other parts as well. Also, our institute, while those eyewitnesses were still alive, we were providing pastoral care for them and also organizing meetings with our students, young people, and all those who were interested to hear a little bit more of their stories personally from them, not through the recordings or reading the transcripts. And by the way, this is Father Volodymyr Stankiewski I mentioned to you, and whose citation I read to you as well. So, catacomb period of the Greek Catholic Church, as you saw, it lasted from since the arrest of the bishops in 1945 up to 1989, so almost 50 years. And here is the prison photos of those arrested bishops and Metropolitan Joseph Slipy. However, even though the official hierarchy was arrested, nevertheless, the church could continue its hierarchy through all the period of catacomb church. And we are speaking about 3 generations, again in parentheses, of the underground bishops. So, but 5 of them were titular, and the leading Lviv Archieparchy, for example, were Redemptorist fathers, such as Vasil Velichkovsky, Volodymyr Sterenyuk. In other eparchy, namely Stanislaviv, Basilian fathers were in lead, and in Mukachevo eparchy, it was mostly white clergy who were in lead. And by the way, Bishop Alexander Hira, he was twice arrested, and the rest of his life he spent in exile in Karaganda, where nobody regarded him as a bishop, even though he was serving as a bishop to German Catholics who were exiled to Karaganda. And he ordained the bishop. Here is another picture. It's already late 80s, and it's already time of the legalization of the church. It's a picture in front of the Council for Religious Affairs in Moscow. And here are underground bishops and priests who were demanding legalization of their church. So here are some changes within the ministry of bishop during the catacombs. What was important at the time? First of all, it's the fact the bishop was there, he existed, right? Then it was important of ensuring the continuity of episcopate, and we saw that that continuity never was really broken. Bishops were responsible for organization of new ordinations of new priests and their studies, so they were in charge of that. Also, they were somehow coordinating very delicately the work of the clergy. And they would just recommend where they should go, but it was quite dangerous because of there was possible some infiltration from the Soviet state security. Thus, that control was really very nominal, and priest, especially seminary, before he became priest, he would meet bishop only once or twice. During the final examination, you can say, and during the ordination. But it would be done with high level of secrecy and with a very small number of witnesses. Also, bishops in the catacomb church were responsible for taking care of the monastic congregation and orders, especially female religion congregation. And here we have one of the picture of the ordination. It's already 80s, so you can see bishop fully dressed in Eastern Bishop vestments, and it's ordination happening within the private home. Okay, it was not all. There were more responsibilities, such as maintaining contact with the head of the Greek Catholic Church who resided in Rome. And first it was Metropolitan, later Major Archbishop, and later Patriarch and Cardinal Josip Slipy, and later on his successor Miroslav Ivan Lubachevsky, who was also staying in Rome. And also, of course, those contacts with the Roman Apostolic See. If there were any conflicts within the church, and we are all human, right? So conflict could happen. So the bishop also was, through his representatives, the one who would be addressed in order to resolve that conflict. And also preserving the unity was also very important, because there were many attempts to divide, to sow discord within underground clergy by the Soviet state security. And very important as well was that during the period of legalization, when church was coming out from the catacombs existence and was showing itself in a full, you can say, so bishops would be represent the church and try to defend its rights in a different level, as ecclesiastical as well as state representing their church. Here is example and picture of two underground bishops. In the middle is Metropolitan Volodymyr Sternyuk, Redemptorist, and also his helper, who was very active in actually legalization process, Bishop Filimon Kurchaba, also Redemptorist. And it's a tiny room where Metropolitan Volodymyr Sternyuk lived. It's just 16 meters square. So it's very, very tiny, really. But this room was also his home chapel. And when we are talking about underground, so I put here the picture of real underground because it was a picture from March. It's K1 Metropolitan. And Basilian priest is serving liturgy to people who are taking refuge underground in one of the metro station of Kiev from the Russian bombing the city. And thus home churches became the place where Greek Catholics would gather because their own churches were confiscated by the state. Even those some of them could use closed and not used in any way church buildings by opening them and celebrating liturgies inside or within the courtyard in front of the closed doors. We will see some of them later. And also in those home churches, high accent of Catholicity and Catholic images would be given. And maybe some of you could recognize these icons of the Immaculate Heart of Mary and also the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So those images very important and very popular in Halachina. Also one more home altar. There were a lot of accommodation during the underground church. For example, the box of matches would be used as a chalice to carry the Holy Host. A small bottle of perfumes would be used to carry the oil for the sick. And here is some examples of the chalice and the cross and the vestment, well, not vestment, but what was used for the liturgy by the underground priest. Also, there was not possible to find any religious literature or prayer books, so people would write it by hand, copy by hand, or a photocopy. And here you can see some photocopied prayer books and also some written by hand. The same was about holy pictures. It was dangerous to have them, but those are actually very tiny. They are like 2 to 3 centimeters, and they were cut and some were painted even in color and delivered for some believers who have important events, such as, for example, baptism or wedding, in order to commemorate this important Christian event in their life. Also, of course, nuns have to abandon their monastery clothes and wear civil clothes. And here you can see that the window is closed because those nuns gathered for their recollections, for their retreat together and for the prayer, and it was dangerous to show to outside neighbors, some of neighbors would be spying for them, knowing that nuns lived there. So the secrecy was to be observed. Also some pictures of baptism in the home church, and one more picture, so you can see twins are baptized. And also wedding were happening, and not only in the official church environment, but also in the labor camp. So this is wedding in one of the special settlement, and this is the bride and groom in the middle, and the guests. Also, some Christmas play would be held in homes. One of the examples you can see, this is also in labor camp celebration of the Christmas. And for Easter, in our church, we have this tradition to bless Easter food in the Easter baskets. So this is also special settlement, and people, they don't really have baskets, but they have at least some bags with very simple food, but it was regarded as a festive one, and they would come and have their food blessed. As I mentioned, when the church was locked, so people would pray outside those churches. They would visit the holy places, and some of the shrines which were very important, as example, Zarvanitsa shrine of Mother of God, which was a very famous pilgrimage place during interwar period. So it also gathered a huge number of pilgrims, and a huge celebration and liturgy was held there, as you can see, with bishop and 6 priests. Hearing confession was also done during especially such liturgies, and here you can see hearing confession in the graveyards, and also this one hearing confession at the metro station in the real underground. So funerals as well would be held, and one of the example is funeral of a nun. You can see that nun is buried in her vestment, official, but other nuns are staying just in the common civil dressing. And from the cemeteries, actually renewal of memory came forward, and it usually would have a combination of Christian prayer for the dead, and also people slowly would retrieve their also national memory. And some of them would look back in their history, which was not allowed by Soviets to be public. And going to the graveyard, taking care of the graves of the tombs of famous Ukrainians who were forgotten, who were not talked about anymore. So it was really that renewal of the memories. And also huge event, which was also sometimes held in the cemeteries. And here one of the pictures showing liturgy held in the cemetery in city Drohobych. It was a celebration of millennium of Christianity by Greek Catholics, and you can see the memorial crosses would be elected commemorating this event. And of course, everything what you see, it was in the eyes of the Soviet state illegal, and it was punishable by the law. And usually punishment for the active priest and laity, it would be fine of 50 rubles, and it was quite a lot. So it was almost half of the teacher's monthly salary in the Soviet Union. And usually people would gather that the necessary amount of money for the priest or for those who were fined to pay it off. Sometimes priest could get 4 fines per month because he was quite active, and people will help him to manage and not to be imprisoned, because if you not pay the fine, you could be imprisoned for some time. And we don't really have much time, I can see, but maybe just some statistic. We already saw some of them, but here is a little bit more. So by 1988, there were 9 bishops who were not registered, and they would be even persecuted. They were constantly under surveillance, and around 260 priests who were known by Soviet authorities. However, later we see a number changing, and it grows quite rapidly, and there are circa 5 million of faithful. By the year 2006, 18 bishops, a lot of priests, parishes, communities, monastic, also publishing houses, Catholic, different organization, but it's not in the statistic. Maybe just very quickly we will switch to open letter, which was issued on August 1987. It was among signees were Bishop Pavlo Vasilik, several priests and laity, and they publicly announced, we are coming from the underground. We don't want to be prohibited anymore. There are many of us, we want to have our rights back. And it was happening in the light of the perestroika, glasnost, which was announced by, at that time, Communist Party leader Mikhail Gorbachev. So, and a very famous picture of Ukrainian bishop and priest walking in the Red Square, demanding legalization for their church, and it was 1989, so they already could put their priestly and bishops' vestments and walk in the Red Square, not afraid to be arrested, even it was quite probable at that time. And also in Moscow was held a hunger strike on Arbat Street, and it was cyclical. So it was some group was changing each other since May until November. And the main demand was, of course, legalization of the Greek Catholic Church. The consequences of that legalization process, it was that when Mikhail Gorbachev went to Rome to meet on the official visit to meet now Saint Pope John Paul II, before that meeting happened in Soviet newspapers, central newspapers, was published short notice that Greek Catholic communities now could officially register according to Soviet law on religion. Later on, St. George Cathedral in Lviv was transferred back from the Orthodox Church, Russian Orthodox Church, to the Greek Catholic Church. And the final point in this legalization process was return of the head of the Greek Catholic Church, Major Archbishop Miroslav Ivan Cardinal Lubachevsky, from Rome to Lviv. And it was already the, as I said, final stop, and it could be said that the church was out the catacombs, and it could now freely start its rebuilding of its institution, of its normal life. Thank you for your attention.